Good evening, everyone, and blessed be. This is your host, Aries, StarWind, and welcome back to another episode of Witchcraft After Hours, where things might get a little spicy, but we don't mind. Alright, so tonight's reading comes from Miss Mackenzie Sage Wright of Exemplar.com. She's a Wiccan of 25 years. Sage likes to put her background as a writer and teacher to use by helping people learn about this neo-pagan path. Tonight's topic: Wicca specifically and its views on sex. Let's go. In many religions, sex is seen as sinful to a large extent. In the more mainstream world religions, it's reserved for two married people and not up for debate. Most people don't think about their God having sex. In most major world religions, God's sex life is non-existent. It's believed he's brought forth by the universe, by his word. And in any one major group of religions, Christianity, even his son was brought forth by immaculate conception. Things are a bit different in Wicca, which is why it is sometimes misunderstood. Wicca is a fertility religion, so sex has a prominent place within it. Sex is intertwined with many Wiccan beliefs, rites, rituals, and myths. Further, there's so much more to sex than just the sex act. Let's take a look at some of the complexities of this subject and see how it fits in the Wiccan religion. Here we go. Wicca, a fertility religion. If you ask most people what Wicca is, you'll probably hear it's a nature-based religion. One has to take into consideration that in Wicca, nature is not just blinked into existence. Nature means sex. Sex, of course, is pleasurable. It's an expression of love, and it's how we bring children into our lives. But think behind the mechanics of human sex. Sex ensures the propagation of most species and the continuation of life. Fruit-bearing plants reproduce sexually. Life on the planet hinges on its being a fertile planet. The birds and the bees have it right. Sex is not just part of life. It's not just affirming. It is what life is all about. You will find fertility symbols and symbols of sexuality everywhere in Wicca. They reflect the fertility of nature. As the man plants a seed of life in the woman, so the farmer plants the seed into the ground. Look at the wheel of the year. It revolves around the architectural cycle, which are the cycles that revolve around the Earth's fertility. Common mythology associated with the cycles of the seasons revolves around sex. The goddess and god have sex. She becomes pregnant. He dies and is reborn of the goddess. Thus, the cycle is perpetuated. This is not to be taken as advocating incest between mother and son. Indeed, we don't take myth as something that literally happens. What Wicca teaches us is that the energies of the divine duality, sexual energies, are intertwined with the fertility cycles in nature. So, we have blatant fertility symbols. Sexual symbols in Wicca. When learning about Wicca for beginners, we're introduced to the various altar tools. Looking at Wiccan tools upon the altar, you'll find a lot of sexual symbolism. The majority of tools are aligned with gender. Wiccan tools associated with the female gender represent the vagina and the womb. They're generally passive and receptive. Tools associated with the male gender represent the penis. They're generally active and projective. So, what are the Wiccan tools and sexual symbolism? You have the athame, the ritual knife or sword. Its gender association, male. Uses, projecting and directing energy. And its qualities and associations, projective, active, element of air, masculine, phallic, symbol. Next tool we have is the wand or staff. Its gender association, also male. Its uses, projecting and directing energy as well. Qualities and associations: projective, active, element of fire, masculine, phallic. Next tool, we have the cup or cauldron. Its gender association, female. Uses, holding things, namely liquid. Its qualities and associations, receptive, passive, element of water, feminine. It's a yonic symbol. And lastly, we have the pentacle, the disc symbol. Its gender association is female. Its uses, holding things. Things are placed on it for blessings. And its qualities and associations, receptive, passive, element of earth. It's feminine, and it's a yonic symbol. Next up, we have the Great Rite pumpkin carving. So, the Great Rite. While in some religions, polarity is seen as the battle between good and evil. In Wicca, polarity is seen as the intermingling of genders, equals yet opposites. The goal is not for one to destroy the other, but to bring them together in perfect harmony and balance. Phallus is the Latin for penis, and it's the generative force in nature. Yonic is the ancient Sanskrit word for vagina or womb, and it is the receptive force in nature. The meaning of these two symbols is displayed in part of the Wiccan ritual called the Great Rite. The most common form of the Great Rite is performed symbolically. The ritual knife is plunged into the ritual chalice. This is symbolic sex, not just the physical sex act, but the union of opposites, which represents the creative forces of the universe. It is the meaning of the masculine and the feminine, the positive and the negative, the yin and the yang. Two parts that come together equally to form a whole. The Great Rite is usually performed symbolically in Wiccan rituals, but not always. In some covens, the high priest and high priestess may perform the actual Great Rite during ritual. This is usually performed by the high priest and high priestess, who are usually an involved couple. It's also generally performed in private. Other ritual participants exit, and there is a private place prepared for the rite. Not all Wiccan covens reserve the Great Rite for romantically involved couples. That would miss the point of what it means to be a high priestess or high priest. When third degree is reached, the high priest and high priestess are acting as vessels of the god and goddess invoked. The point is to put your own ego aside and channel the deities. But hang-ups about sex are hard to shake even for some Wiccans. Having sex with someone purely for ritual religious purposes, though it may be perfectly fitting within the context of Wicca, is still something few Wiccans pursue, most likely because they fear the criticism it would draw from outsiders. As such, this practice is so very rare these days, some Wiccans will insist it never happened and never will. Now, let's speak about sex magic in Wicca. Aside from the Great Rite, sex is sometimes used in Wiccan ritual for the purpose of magic. This can be performed by anyone who wishes to engage in it, not just high priests and priestesses. This is not about channeling the divine to perform a sacred act in ritual, it's simply a very practical means to an end. The premise behind a work of magic is that the practitioner or practitioners raise energy and direct it toward a goal. Sex is considered a powerful way of building energy and releasing it at climax. It's often something couples who practice magic together will do in the privacy of their own home. Solitary Wiccans may achieve the same effects through masturbation. Wiccan views on human sexuality. Because Wiccans view sex as a natural, positive, life-affirming act, we generally accept our sexual nature as part of being human. We don't see anything wrong with nudity. The naked body is merely the natural state. There are no distinctions made in Wicca about having sex before or after marriage. A healthy expression of physical love between consenting people is perfectly acceptable. This doesn't mean that every Wiccan chooses to be sexually active, or to have multiple sex partners. Some still opt for abstinence, celibacy, or they reserve sex for serious relationships. Everyone must make their own choices about their own bodies. While there are no wrong decisions, sexual activities are not decisions that should be taken lightly. Likewise, few Wiccans have hang-ups these days about sexual orientation. It should be noted that when Wicca began to develop in 1940s and grown in the 1950s, homophobia wasn't uncommon. People were still largely a product of their own time. But attitudes have changed, and you'll find the vast majority of Wiccans are very liberal about various orientations and identifications, and supporters of the LGBT rights. Open doesn't mean anything goes. Just because Wiccans are open in progressive attitudes towards sex, it should not be assumed that it means we think anything goes. Wicca's key tenets are finding a healthy balance in life and taking personal responsibility for oneself. Sex may be natural, but nature can be exploited and misused. When there's an imbalance of power, this is why reputable covens do not engage in ritual sex initiations of neophytes. If the coven is performing the actual great rite, it's performed between two people in equal positions of power. Any Wiccan coven claiming you're required to have sex with someone to join is in a coven, you should run away very quickly. Imbalance of power extends to beyond the coven. Sex between child and adult, teacher-student, employer-employee, and the like is always sketchy, if not outright inappropriate and potentially damaging. When sex is not about sex. When it's not about a personal, intimate connection to someone else, but used as a tool of manipulation, used to fill a void left by someone else, sometimes it's an obsession, compulsion, or a cry for attention. When sex essentially becomes like substance abuse, a person needs to deal with the underlying issue. When sex is not consensual. Sex that is forced or involves is manipulated, it is not an act of love, life-affirming, but an act of violence and control. When a person is irresponsible about it. When they expose themselves to diseases, or worse, expose others, or have unwanted children that they're not prepared to care for, this is neither balanced nor responsible. There are some other topics that are more hotly debated. For example, some would say pornography is healthy for the most part because it's consensual and a fantasy indulgence. Others would say the porn industry exploits sex and people for profit. There's always room for debate on the details. So, Wiccan attitudes towards sex. Overall, you'll find Wicca a religion in which we are free to embrace our sexuality and express it if we choose. This is not because we want to go wild and get crazy, but because we respect and value sex as a natural force and part of the human nature. As with all things, it's not about blindly following arbitrary guidelines, but in using judgment and wisdom when acting and making decisions. As long as we're acting in a responsible and thoughtful manner and keeping a healthy balance, our sexuality is something we can embrace without guilt or shame. Beginner Wiccans should realize we don't believe our gods think sex is sinful, nor do we believe they expect us to fight our true natures and desires. As it says in our main piece of liturgy, "And ye shall be free from slavery, and as a sign that ye be truly free, you shall be naked in your rights. And ye shall dance, sing, feast, make music, and love, all in my praise. For mine is the ecstasy of the Spirit, and mine also is joy on earth." Wow, great read. Again, that was from Miss Mackenzie Sage Wright from Exemplar.com, and I 100% agree with pretty much everything, if not everything, that she said here. Oh God, it was just perfectly worded. It also delved into the fact that, yes, even though we as Wiccans do believe we should all be free in our sexuality, it does not mean, we're all just going crazy and having wild orgies for no reason. That's definitely not what it's about. There's always a deeper meaning to our sexual relations with others. And I even love how she incorporated all the tools that are used in Wicca and what they symbolize sexually, and how it goes with the god and the goddess and the male and female energies. Great read. Again, you can read this for yourself. Again, it was from Miss Mackenzie Sage Wright, and you can read this, go back and read it yourself, or come back and listen to me again on, this was from explore.com. So I hope you all enjoyed the read this evening. Again, I'm your host, Aries StarWind. Come back and join me again for another segment. And always, God is blessed be, and I will see you all later on.